All right, we begin with oil prices and Brent crude, West Texas Intermediate, both falling in early trading this morning. And from the looks of it, oil, of course, will be falling to a low not seen since November of last year. 73.68 early trading for Brent crude, West Texas Intermediate 69.94. There's a whole lot to discuss in terms of energy, also Europe, technology. I want to bring in our special guest, Mr. Christof Rühl, who's the senior research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to first ask you about how you're seeing oil prices with the ebb and flow for Brent crude and the North American grade.
Good morning, first of all, and thank you for having me. With oil prices, you have to understand a principle, and the principle is that one has to start from a view of the fundamentals of the market, of demand and supply in the long term. And then we have all these short-term disruptions which determine day-to-day fluctuations. And the important thing to understand at the moment is that the market is oversupplied. In other words, there is enough oil. All the forecasts for this year and for next year indicate that supply is a little bit above demand. So there is pressure on prices. That's the fundamental starting point. And then you add to this all these little things, the discussions about Ukraine, will the sanctions be lifted? The discussions around Iran, will the sanctions be tightened? The discussions around the Turkish pipeline, the discussions around what OPEC is going to do, the trade wars, the tariff situation. And you can see how short-term fluctuations go up and down, but you can see also two things. They go up and down, a trend which is fundamentally not rising, but either stable or going down. So we are now from 76 down to 74, somewhere in the region of 72, number one. And number two, the fluctuations, the volatility are actually getting better. So the same kind of announcement for, say, the American president about a tariff against China 3 weeks ago triggered a bigger reaction than it does today. So in other words, the market sort of steps back a little and takes it with a grain of salt. And the same kind of triggers cause less of a reaction. So the fundamental picture then is one where prices over the course of the year will be under pressure, and short-term volatility will depend on the solution of these open problems, especially the Ukraine and Russian war and the Middle Eastern OPEC situation.
Thank you for that. You mentioned Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky is supposed to be meeting with U.S. President Trump later today. They're supposed to be signing this mineral deal that will give the U.S. access to mineral resources in Ukraine. So supposed to be some sort of backstop for security guarantees. We don't really have that much details, but some legal experts are saying that there's some gaps in this deal. What do you make of it from your standpoint?
Well, the first thing which is kind of curious about this deal is that no one is really aware of being big riches in terms of minerals present in the Ukraine. The geological survey, both the old ones of the Soviet Union, of the Ukraine, and even of the US, don't indicate anything like that. It's not quite clear what the price here really is, what the resource really is. The second one, the legal insecurity, I believe that, but I'm not a legal expert, but it's accompanied by a political insecurity, which is that Zelensky clearly wanted security guarantees. Trump clearly is not prepared to give them security guarantees. Listen, quite honestly, from my personal point of view, I think that for the current American president, it's probably more important to be seen as laying the groundwork for a lasting peace than actually achieving peace tomorrow. And the mineral deal is a nice face-saving way of saying we, the Americans, are finding a way of getting reimbursed for our expenses, and also a nice way to signal to Russia that now we have made a deal with Ukraine, you better play ball as well. So it's a political maneuver to me more than a commodity-based huge transaction.
Thank you so much for that. I do want to get to Germany and the recent elections that we had just a few days ago before the week began, with the CDU and Friedrich Merz emerging as winners. He's now the chancellor in waiting. I wanted to ask you about some of the challenges that he has to overcome, starting, I guess, with the energy crisis in Germany. And I know since we're talking about Ukraine and Russia, Germany has been impacted by that. How do you see him navigating the waters going forward as far as the German economy is concerned?
Within Germany, there is a very strong fraction historically of people who were betting on cooperation with Russia delivering energy and Germany delivering technology to Russia. Friedrich Merz is not part of that party. He's part of the Conservative Party, who was always slightly more detached from it. So with him winning the elections, the odds are that the standoff between Russia and Europe in terms of energy deliveries will continue a little longer. The second, Europe, as you know, was terribly dependent on Russian gas pipelines and gas deliveries. Some of these pipelines have been physically disrupted. Some of that disruptions have been so scareful for Europe that they really realized that energy security is at stake. And they have been so successfully addressed by now importing LNG, liquefied natural gas from elsewhere in the world, including from the US by ship, rather than relying on these Russian pipelines, that it's very hard to see how Russian gas deliveries will come back to Europe to the extent they used to be before. I think that even if peace breaks out tomorrow or sanctions are lifted, oil flows will continue back to normal, what they were before the war. Gas flows will not. Europe will not import as much gas from Russia as it did before. And that is a long-term problem for Russia, because this gas comes from the western part of Russia and can only be exported to Europe. There's no pipeline to China or anywhere else. So it's stranded if Europe doesn't buy it. And it looks like to be stranded there for a while now.
Thank you so much. The Reuters is reporting, according to sources, that Ed Miliband, Energy Secretary in the UK, will be heading to China in March to discuss collaborations on energy. Again, it's unnamed sources, but this is what they're reporting this morning. What's your take on what this could mean between UK-China relations, and what does an energy collaboration mean between the two nations?
Well, you know, the whole world needs to sort itself anew. If this tariff game is getting serious, then other countries will have to talk to each other, how to circumnavigate them, how to replace essential flows such as energy. And so in that context, I don't see anything special by envoys being sent back and forth. One of the side effects of the tariff policy, as announced by the Trump administration, will be to get unlikely bedfellows sort of closer together, such as China and Europe, such as, in your example, China and the UK. Now, what they discuss in concrete terms, I don't know. I know China is a huge player in the production of renewable energies. I know that the UK government still is betting on decarbonization in a big way, but there may be also gas deals in the making. There may be other things, infrastructure deals in the making. But overall, the lesson is we should get used to countries talking to each other directly in order to redirect some of these flows of investment, some of these flows of capital into infrastructure, some of the supportive flows of energy around the US if the US is staying to be rather for itself.
I want to go back to the EU. It's reported that the EU leaders are calling for more funding flexibility to be allowed to, I guess, have more money going to defense. You were talking about, you know, more capital going into infrastructure. I know Germany has a debt break, for instance. What do you make of European EU leaders, I guess, scrambling together to try to spend more money on defense?
I think generally all the noise that came out from the US was rather healthy for Europe to get a wake-up call and get its act together a little bit. I think offense for somebody of my generation, I would have never thought this is going to happen, that there will be a war in Europe again, and that we have to think about spending precious resources on military goods again. But it's the case, and so be it. I think Europe, in the current situation, if they seriously believe Russia is a threat, which may be, and if they want to seriously counter it, they need to spend more on defense. There is no way around it. But having said that, you know, one shouldn't over-dramatize. You look at Russia, its economy the size of Italy, its population not even the size of France and Germany combined. So all this, you know, big fear is relatively easy contained. The only real problem is the nuclear arsenal President Putin has, and it's very dubious that we are at a point where this is going to be used. So it would help to spend a bit more on defense and otherwise hang the issue a little bit lower than always just thinking that we are, you know, bordering the Third World War just because the Americans are deciding to stop financing European defenses, which is their right to do.
I want to round off with technology, particularly Bitcoin and artificial intelligence. So Bitcoin has seen a big drop, about almost 27% since its highs in January. Tencent has announced that they have a new AI model that's supposed to rival DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and the like. I wanted to get your take, if you wanted to share your thoughts on that, but particularly the energy demand for cryptocurrency and also for artificial intelligence. Do you think those demands can be met as we move forward and these chips get more powerful and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so I looked at the energy side to take that first. It's much smaller than what people think. And at the moment, it's not really a threat to either the production of electricity or to the supply of the underlying primary fuels like coal, uranium, or natural gas, whatever electricity is produced with. These are infrastructure measures which can be solved. Otherwise, I would argue that one needs to distinguish Bitcoin from artificial intelligence. I am still of the persuasion and maybe of the generation of people who don't understand what cryptocurrencies ultimately are good for, except for facilitating clandestine transactions. So this is a bubble. And it's not a surprise to me that bubbles sort of open and close very fast and go up and down 25%. As long as there is no agreed upon role of Bitcoin as either reserve currency or as part of the international financial system, it will continue to be a very volatile asset and not for the faint-hearted. Now, artificial intelligence is interesting because, again, we don't know exactly where it's going, how important it's going. But if history is any guide, then we know that two things, that the Americans are the undisputed leader in this field, and that other countries, including, but not only China, will be very quick and very experienced and very good in copying that and may well be capable of producing copies which are equal or better to the original. And then it will come down to an entirely different question, which is in the US, you can feed your artificial intelligence with anything the machines can find. We have some examples where people obviously let the machines loose on rather woke and politically correct feedstock, so to speak, and they come up with according stories. But in China, that's different, right? In China, if you give in their AI models, you type in Winnie the Pooh, it goes blank. Why? Because people refer to their president as Winnie the Pooh in a joking manner. So it's excluded. So if you start to restrict artificial intelligence, then you are somewhere between sort of a total, know-it-all state, which is hard to imagine, or close to becoming useless because nobody knows exactly where the sensor draws the line. That's an interesting experiment going on in the background here, which will impair the ability of China and others to provide cheaper copied versions of the breakthroughs done in the US.
Christof Rühl, Senior Research at the Global Policy Center at Columbia University. I do thank you so much for your time talking to us here on the Global Business Report.